All right, so a credit card is called an open-ended installment loan, as opposed to the other formula we did last time with a car. That's a fixed installment loan, or it's a closed-ended loan. So it's called an open-ended because it's not going to be the same payment every month, and it's not going to be the same amount that you're borrowing every month. You know, every time you use your credit card, you're changing the amount that you owe. And so it's open-ended. It doesn't really have an end date either, unless you actually plan to close out your account. And so it's also called revolving credit because of that, because it's always sort of like, you're increasing, you're decreasing, you're increasing, you're decreasing based on the payments that you're making and so on. So just a sample of an old credit card statement here. It'll show you your outstanding balance, your available credit, when your next payment is due, your minimum payment due date, or what you can pay the minimum of. And then, it'll tell you when you've posted a payment and so on. Okay, so how many of you guys have a credit card? Okay, more than I'd hope, but anyway, it is what it is. Okay, so customers who make a purchase during the billing period and pay the amount of the purchase by the payment due date are not charged interest. Okay, so the ideal way to use your credit card is to charge something on your credit card, because maybe your paycheck's coming that Friday and you'd rather not take the money out of your bank account. So you put it on your credit card, but then at the end of the month you actually pay off the entire balance. Okay, then you're actually not being paid for using your own money. You're not paying to use your own money. So if you're not paying off the balance, then you're paying more than what you would actually pay if you just paid from your debit card or cash. So you're not charged interest. So if you're customers who make a purchase and do not pay the entire amount of the purchase by the payment due date are charged interest on the remaining balance. Okay, and most people do not pay the remaining balance, and so that's how the credit cards make lots and lots of money. Now, there used to be a lot of different ways that credit card companies would figure out how to charge your interest, how to figure how much interest they should charge you. It used to be that they would charge you what the balance. Some cards would charge you the balance at the beginning of the month. Some of them would charge you the balance at the end of the month, and they'd figure out on that. But they realized that sometimes it benefited the credit card if they did it, at the beginning, but then sometimes it benefited the person with the credit card if they, because maybe you were about to make a whole bunch of large purchases and they charged you the interest at the beginning. Or maybe you made a middle of the month payment, and if they did it at the end, well, they weren't making their money either. What was fair to everybody was this process called the average daily balance method. And so I don't know of a credit card that doesn't use this method now. Okay, back in the day, there were lots of different methods. But basically, they want to figure out what is the average balance that you have on a daily basis. And they take that average, and that's what they base the interest on. So to figure out how to do this, you first have to figure out that average daily balance. So the average daily balance is the sum of the unpaid balances for each day in the billing period divided by the number of days in the billing period. Is every month going to have the same number of days? No. Okay, so it depends on the month as to how many days you're going to divide by. But basically, you have to add up all of the balances you have for each day. Now, there's a much more systematic way than just saying day 1 plus day 2 plus day 3 and so on. And so what I've done is I've created a chart at the bottom to help you organize this. Now, after you figure out what your average daily balance is, you're then going to use the simple interest formula to figure out how much interest is actually going to be paid. Okay. Now, the biggest difference between this problem and all the other problems that we've done is that the time in a credit card problem is the number of months in the billing cycle. And how often do you usually get billed? Once a month. So almost, 99.9% of the time, your time is equal to 1. because you have 1 month in your billing cycle. Okay, so this is the only time that we are going to say T is the number of months, only on a credit card problem. Every other formula we have done, T is the number of what? Years. Okay, so make sure that you don't confuse that on the problem. All right, so to determine the average daily balance, making this chart would be helpful. It's not that hard to sort of recreate this chart. Notice the columns are date, unpaid balance, number of days at each unpaid balance, and then the product of the previous two columns just means I'm going to multiply these two numbers together. So I have a column just to show what I get when I multiply them together. Okay, so the steps are right down here, and we're going to look at the other handout in order to help us work the average daily balance on one of these. So it says to first, step 1, determine the initial unpaid balance and record that date and amount in row 1. All right, so let's take a look at example number 1 on our other handout. So the credit card with the transactions described on the right uses the average daily balance method to calculate interest. The monthly interest rate is 1.5% of the average daily balance. Notice that it's a monthly interest rate. That's why it looks so low, because it's for the month, not for the year. Okay, so 1.5%. And so the chart is what you need to look at for the information. So I just folded my handout in half here so we can follow along. The previous balance was $6,220, and this was a March 1st billing date. On March 5th, let's assume this is our credit card, we made a payment of $350, so we got a credit of $350. That means when you see a credit, that means that you can deduct that amount from what you owe. On March 7th, we made a charge of $40 at a restaurant. So what does that do to the balance? Do I subtract that or add that? Add, because that adds to what I owe. On March 12th, we went to the grocery store and charged $70. On March 21st, we had car repairs of $270. And on March 31st, that was the end of the billing period. Okay, notice it's 1 month. And then the payment due date is April 9th. All right, so what was the first month of the billing period? March 1st. Good. So right here under the first column of the date, I'm going to put March 1st. And I had an unpaid balance of what? Right. So $6,220. That was my unpaid balance on March 1st. So that amount at the very top, previous balance. Okay, so the next date that something occurred, like some action occurred on our card, was March 5th. So I'm going to write March 5th right here. So on March 5th, we made a payment of $350. So to figure out our unpaid balance, we're going to take that $6,220 and we're going to subtract the $350. Good, $5,870. Everybody get $5,870? So that is our unpaid balance on March 5th. Okay, the next date would be March 7th. And so now I'm starting with $5,870, but what happened on that day? I got to add $40 to my balance. Good, because I charged $40 at a restaurant. So add 40 to what you have in your calculator. Okay, good, $5,910. All right, on March 12th, I had $5,910 as to what I owed, but now I have to add. Right, but add 70 to get $5,980. Good. And then on March 21st, I take that $5,980 and I have to do what? Good, add $270. And we get $6,250. And what was the last day of the billing period? Good, March 31. Okay, so March 31st. I didn't used to add this column in here because nothing actually happens on March 31st, right? We don't have any charges. But it seemed to help students get the amount of days right. And so what do we owe on March 31st? Yeah, $62.50. Nothing else happened on that day, but we owe $62.50 on that day. All right, so now that we figure out our unpaid balance on the different dates, now what we're going to do is figure out how many days, so this is the next column, how many days was our balance actually $62.20? And then how many days was it actually $58.70? And so on. Okay, so looking at this one, $62.20, how many days was it at that balance? 4. How did you figure that out? 5 minus 1. Okay, so March 5th minus 1, we had 4 days at this balance. Okay, so now on March 5th it changed to $58.70. So how many days do we have it at this balance? 2. Good. So subtract the dates from each other. So now on March 7th, our balance changed to $59.10. So how many days do we have it at $59.10? Okay, 5 days because 12 minus 7 is 5. So then on that day we had $59.80. How many days was it at $59.80? Okay, 11. Everybody agree? Okay, and so this is where it helps to add this 31st on here, because looking at $62.50, how many days was it at $62.50 for this row? 10. And when I didn't add this column, people would say, oh, it was at 10 days, but then the 31st, how many days is this? Well, the 31st just counts as 1 day. So technically, it's at that balance for 11 days, and some people were really good at recognizing that, but most people would just subtract 31 minus 21 and get 10 and not realize, oh, I have to include the 31st as well. Oh, okay. So this is a 9. All right. So that's when I say, does everybody agree? Because it didn't look right to me, but I'm going by you guys. You guys got to say it right when I say it. Does everybody agree? And you guys are like, yeah. Okay. So 9. Now here's another way that I would double check whether I got my days right. Okay. Add this column, and how many days should appear in this column? 31, because it's March, has 31 days. And so now add it with 4, 2, 5, 9, 10, and 1. Now, had we accidentally left that 11 in, when you added these up, it wouldn't have added to 31, and that's when you could go back and say, wait a second, one of these isn't right. Now, if you mess up 2 numbers one way and the other, and it still adds up to 31, I can't help you there. Okay, so if you got to, hopefully you don't screw it up where it adds a day and then subtracts a day to 2 of your rows. So we have 31 days. This is good. And so instead of saying, let me take 6220 plus 6220 plus 6220 plus 6220 4 times, and then add 5870 plus 5870, right? Because that's what the sum of every balanced day is. Instead of doing that, I can just go ahead and multiply these amounts across. And so 6220 times 4 gives me 24,880. Okay, go ahead and multiply all the rest. Take your balance times the number of days. Okay, 11,740. Who's got row 3? Yes, sir. 29,550. Good. Okay, who's got the next one? Sorry, I was looking for hands. What was it? 53,820. Okay, good. All right, who's got the next one? Yes, ma'am. 62,500. Good. And who's got the last one? 6250. Good. Okay, that one was the toughest. Okay. All right, so here's what we get when we multiply that balance times the number of days. So now to figure out how much the sum of all the balances would be, the last thing you have to do now is add this column. Okay, so add all of those amounts. Any questions on where we got those numbers from? $188,740. You guys agree with that? Okay, good question. What does this number mean? Yeah, very good. So now go back to your handout and look at the formula for average daily balance. All right, so this number is if you added up all of your balances for every day of the month, like day 1 plus day 2 plus day 3. We just did it in more of a shortcut way by saying this amount times 4 days, this amount times that many days. Okay, so this is the numerator of this fraction here, the sum of the unpaid balances for each day in the billing period. Okay, so this goes right here in the numerator. So we have 188,740, and we have to divide by the number of days in the billing period. And because it's March, it was 31. And so we get 6088.387 ... Now, if you look at the handout where we were working the problem, this handout here, it says round to the nearest cent. So my first answer should be $6,088.39. Okay, so this is the average daily balance. So notice that it is actually less than what we owed at the beginning of the month, and it's less than what we owed at the end. So it comes out pretty good. You know, instead of using that beginning balance or ending balance, it's less than that. It's an average of what we balanced every day of the month. So when we look at this handout here, it says, what's the average daily balance for the billing period? That's our 6088.39. So now it wants us to find the interest to be paid on April 1st, the next billing date. And it says round to the nearest cent. What formula do we use to find interest for a credit card? I equals PRT, which is also called the what? What kind of interest? Simple interest. Okay, so the simple interest formula. And so this is our P now. That's what, so the average daily balance, the whole reason we worked that out is to find our P for this formula, our principal. So 6088.39 times a rate of, 0.015. And then what's our time? 1. Good, because it's 1 month. There was only 1 month in the billing period. And hopefully you get 91.32585, and it wants us to round to the nearest cent. So we get $91.33. So this is our interest. That's the interest we have to pay for that month. So now it says, find the balance due on April 1st. Well, I know I owe this interest, but what do I do with that interest? Add it to what? Good, the unpaid balance. Is the 6088 my unpaid balance? The 6250, right. So this is not my unpaid balance. That's where a lot of students get confused. This was just used to figure out how much interest I have. Okay, so you have to take your interest and add it to your unpaid balance at the end of the month. Of the month. So we have 91.33 plus, this is where you go back to your chart, and the last amount in your chart was 62.50. Okay, so that's how much you owe the credit card company at the end of the month, plus the interest that we're being charged. Okay, so I got $63.41 and 33 cents. Is that what you guys got? All right, so here are our answers so far. All right, one more part to this question. This credit card requires a $10 minimum monthly payment if the balance due at the end of the billing period is less than $360. Do we owe less than $360? No. So our minimum payment's not going to be $10. Instead, the minimum monthly payment is 1/36 of the balance due at the end of the billing period. Rounded up to the nearest whole number. Okay, what key word was in there? Rounded what? Not just whole number, rounded up. Very important. Rounded up to the nearest whole dollar. All right, so what's the minimum monthly payment due on April 9th? So first of all, which amount do we have to figure this out from? Yes, okay, so this is your balance due on April 1st. So you take that $63.41 and 33 cents, and we're going to take 1/36 of it, which means you're going to multiply by 1/36, or that is the same as dividing by 36. All right, so in my calculator, I have 176.148 and so on. But I have to round this appropriately, so raise your hand if you can tell me what it should be rounded to. Yes, sir. 177 is correct because it's not to the nearest dollar, it's rounded not just to the nearest dollar, rounded up to the nearest dollar. Okay, so because this word right here, up, was in there, that means that it doesn't matter what the decimal is after that. If there is any decimal portion, then you're going to take that dollar and move it up one to 177. The only time that you would not change the value, okay, the only time it would stay at 176 is if your calculator, you put it in and you got exactly 176 and nothing after the decimal. All right, so any questions here? Okay, so example number 2. Your credit card has a balance of $2,900 and an annual interest rate of 12%. You decide to pay off the balance over 3 years. If there are no further purchases charged to the card, how much must you pay each month, and how much total interest will you pay? Okay, so this problem is a little different. They're not asking you what you're going to pay, in interest for the card for that month. They're saying, you know what? You're at a situation you need to just you can't charge on this card anymore, but you want to go ahead and just pay it off. All right, so this has now become a different type of problem. All right, so notice that it's no longer an open-ended installment loan because we now are going to have an end date. When are we going to pay this off by? 3 years. And it says, how much must you pay each month? So notice that you're making equal monthly payments to pay this off. What does that sound like? You're making equal monthly payments over a certain time period. Not an annuity because you're not actually saving your money. It would be similar to a car loan, right? You're just like the car loan, you are now paying the same amount each month for something for something you're borrowing money for. Okay, you are trying to pay off the loan. And so this goes back to the payment, the PMT formula for cars. Do you remember how I said it's not just for cars? It's for, buying a house. It's the same formula you would pay for financing furniture. Okay, so it's not necessarily the car formula. It does work for cars, but it's basically for anything that you're going to be paying off an equal payment over a certain amount of time. All right, so our PMT formula is P, parentheses, R over N, close your parentheses, fraction, open your parentheses, 1 minus, parentheses, 1 plus, R over N raised to the negative NT power, close your parentheses. Okay, so go ahead and plug in your amounts here and see if you can work this one out. Okay, let's see. So, did everybody get 96 for this one? Okay, good. So it should have rounded to the nearest dollar to $96. Okay, after you round to the nearest dollar, $96. Everybody good with that one? Okay, so now how do you figure out the total interest paid over 3 years? Good. Monthly payment times 12 times 3 years. Good. You're paying it 12 times a year for 3 years. You have to first figure out how much you are paying over the entire 3 years. And I got $34.56. But now what do you do with that number? Minus the $2,900. Good. Minus the amount that you actually borrowed, because that's not your interest. That's how much you borrowed. Okay, $556. Okay, so now example number 3, I'm going to have you work with somebody. And it's basically very similar to example number 1. But this time your chart is at the bottom. Okay, as to your credit card statement. But this time, the credit card with the transaction below uses the average daily balance method and a monthly interest rate of 1.4%. And so you're going to see if you can do all those 4 now that I sort of distracted you with a different type of problem. Can you now go back and work this together? Okay, so for your average daily balance, you need to record the date, the balance, the number of days, and then your products. So on June 1st should have been your first one of $26.45.36. Everybody good there? And then on June 6th, we made a payment of $1,300. So that brings us down to $13.45.36. Is that right? Because I just did that in my head. Is that what you guys got for the second line? Yeah. Okay. All right, so on June 8th, we have a charge for getting gas. So take $13.45.36 and add your $35.02. And so I got $13.80.38. On June 9th, we had a charge for groceries. So add $137.83. And we get $15.18.21. On June 17th, we had a charge for 2 things. So add $41.37 and then also add $215.63. And we get $17.75.21. Okay, so I added both of these here. And then on June 27th, we had a charge for clothing, so add $215.63. And we had $1990.84. And then the last day of the billing cycle was June 30th. And we didn't do anything on June 30th, so we still have $1990.84. Everybody okay with those amounts? So now, how many days were we at the first balance? 5, good. The second one? 2. The third one? 1. The June 9th balance was there for 8. Good. The next one, 10. And then the 27th, 3 plus the 30th as 1 day. Okay, add this up and this should equal what? How many days should there be when you add this up? This time 30 because it's the month of June. And I believe that it's all good there. It does add up to 30, right? Okay, now what do I do with these numbers? Question?
Is that 617? I got a different answer.
That's possible. That's possible. So I was doing it really quick here. But 15, 18, 21 is still what you got for the previous one? Okay, and so then when we add 4137 and then add 12543, yeah, I think I inverted my numbers. I'm sorry, I inverted my numbers. So it was right here of 1685 and I got 1685 and 1 cent. Is that what you got? Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. Then that's going to affect all the rest of my numbers. Okay, so then this is 1964 and 1964. Sorry about that. Okay, good? All right, so now this is the toughest part, it seems, for people is the days, because now you just multiply, and I'm not going to work this out because we're out of time, but you're going to put your answers in the next column, and then what are you going to do with all these numbers here? Add them all up. Okay, and then this total, whatever you get, is going to be divided by 30, and that's your answer for part A. The answers are, did you notice the answers are covertly down here? So you can check your answers. Also, in the vocabulary questions on this section, it's going to ask you about your credit score and stuff. You can read about that on page 562 of your textbook. So to answer those vocabulary questions, go to that page. All right, you guys have a good evening. I will see you on Wednesday.